Thanks for the introduction, Marta. The conversation I want to talk about, obviously, my name's Steve Torsa. I'm the founder and managing director of Wholesale Investor. And in this talk, I want to talk about what we see as the vision for the future of capital raising and also the future of venture investment. And if you look at the circumstances that are taking place right now, this has obviously brought this forward. And to give you a bit of history, Wholesale Investor, we are now been Australasia's leading platform for some time now. And effectively what we do is we take high growth companies or innovative companies and we introduce them to high net worth investors. And we matchmake them via our either online platform on the Wholesale Investor site or on CRISP, or we do that at typically our live events. But of course, now we do it through our virtual showcases. In that time, we've been able to build up a database of just over 29,300, and they're mostly focused across Australia, Singapore, and also the UK. The topic of this talk is how do we take that ecosystem and help the entire ecosystem save time, save money, and improve efficiency in their deal making? And that's the way we've thought about it. If you want to understand the DNA of our company, I first want to help you understand what our vision is. Our vision is really simple: creating opportunities for tomorrow. Every email we send, every action we make, this presentation, this entire investment summit, all the events we've run before, everything that we do as a company is about creating an opportunity that doesn't exist. We absolutely love that effectively the companies we work with, the opportunity that we get to help for them to create, whether it be a capital raising opportunity, a strategic partner opportunity, a trade opportunity, it's irrelevant for us because it's really about creating something which doesn't exist. And that's what I think is beautiful about our ecosystem. From a mission standpoint, we're always asking ourselves, how can we utilize technology, platforms, and partners to introduce high net worth investors with emerging growth companies as well? That's always been the core of Wholesale Investor, and that's also been the foundation for CRISP, our capital raising software. It stands for Capital Raising Intelligent Investment Secondary Platform. Now, the final part to this is also really important, is how can we break down the borders between ecosystem? How can we create cross-border collaboration? If you notice, we've done work with governments like the Flanders government out of Belgium, the NZTE, the New Zealand government, the Kotra, the Korean government. We've done work with the Israeli government. We've done work with DIT. We've done work with Austrade. Because we realize the role and the power of the ecosystem is there is no borders to doing opportunities, right? It's really about how do you get that company in the UK to mix with the investor that's in Australia that could potentially have relevant opportunities in Hong Kong or Singapore. How do we create that from an ecosystem perspective? And that is what fundamentally drives us at our core at Wholesale Investor. Now, when we're dealing with investors always say the same thing: introduce me to the good deals. The challenge is, of course, everyone's got their own perspective on what a good deal is and what a good deal isn't. When we deal with companies, they always say, Steve, we want you to introduce us to the good investors. Now, the challenge is we can introduce people to great investors, but they may not be interested in the company. So then it really becomes about how do you create that relevancy? Now, what's been really interesting, if you look at capital raising as a journey, most capital raising, if you look at capital raising 1.0, it's sort of really reliant on personal networks. And that's pretty much, it's not unsurprising that the majority of capital is still raised in this mechanism where it's sort of going through networks of people reaching out to other networks and then hoping to find a relevant potential investor for a company, right? And it's still pretty much driven that way. The only thing that actually changed is that people added email and Excel spreadsheet to actually using that. And the reality is for most founders, they really see capital raising as a bit of a dark art. And from a corporate finance perspective or an advisor's perspective, they typically charge that 6 to 8% fee for that introduction, for that deal structuring, and for the process of actually raising capital. To me, that's capital raising 1.0. 2.0 recognizes the power of the internet and looks to leverage off things like Dropbox, Google Drive, and obviously still factoring in Excel spreadsheet. It's actually amazing, investment banks still using Excel spreadsheet as part of their actual deal making. From the platform perspective, what happened is obviously companies recognize the ability for utilizing the internet, but they're still trying to charge like a personalized one-to-one service that we sort of highlighted in capital raising 1.0. Now, from you as an investor perspective, we've tried to understand what are the different frustrations of the ecosystem. Now, obviously, from an investor's perspective, time it takes to receive information. There's typically no streamlined approach. You're getting deals from all sorts of different sources. You know, some are on email, people are saying to you on LinkedIn. You've got other people, you know, that are obviously introducing it one-to-one. Sometimes founders can be over communicative and a little bit too talkative. So instead of a 30-minute meeting, it suddenly goes for 3 hours. Then all of a sudden, if you are an investor, then it's the receiving of the ongoing communications, because often that can actually drop off. And then the other part from an investor is the one that people don't think about is if you're not interested in opportunity, but you still like it, still like the person that you're dealing with, or whatever, you want to introduce them to somewhere, but you may not have anywhere to introduce them. So for me, when we've looked at this, we've realized that actual capital raising is really built on legacy systems, right? So there's no investor analytics, there's the lack of investor connectivity. Companies are using typically isolated solutions. It's mostly manual processes, often still going through, you know, companies are still spending thousands of dollars on basic things related to sort of company secretary aspects and so forth. And it's a fragmented ecosystem. Everyone's focusing on their own, on their sort of their own area. So to me, and the way we envision what the future of capital raising looks like, it should look like the successful tech companies that it's actually been investing into in all these years. And if you think about it, what we see is that the future of capital raising is really subscription-based deal making, where it does use investor analytics, where it does utilize AI for matchmaking, where it does provide that frictionless engagement, where transactions can be efficient from start to finish, where investment banking tools can actually be digital, right? And allow for growth companies to be able to get access to what they normally wouldn't be able to with an investment bank, be able to use those digital tools online related to sort of investment banking. But the real power is, I believe, that software will lead to the ability to use analytics to create more relevance and more efficient matchmaking between investors, but also it can provide the role in actually standardizing the way in which things are done. So from a company's focus, we've always educated companies on how can you get ready? How can you stay ready? How can you always be raising, right? You may not be always taking money into your bank account, but at least always be in that process and be always basically transaction ready. And then the last one is most important for founders. How can we help founders get to the fastest yes or no possible so that no one is wasting time? From the investor's perspective, the way we've thought about things is that how can we give you increased access to opportunities? How can we help create deal relevancy? How can we help streamline and standardize your own processes for when you're looking to invest into a company? And then how can we help set companies up so that you can actually get a speed to a decision? So the way we've thought about this is, as I mentioned, via CRISP, right? It's our capital raising intelligent investment secondary platform. The way we've built it is to be, number one, obviously software driven, ecosystem enabled, because everything we do is about, I said, bringing together ecosystems to be an end-to-end solution for the companies so that they can utilize it from start to finish, right? There, obviously, engagement with investors is important, that can be done on the platform, that we can utilize data to effectively utilize data to effectively matchmake, and then take in the power of machine learning so that can be improved over time. And then effectively using analytics to understand the real potential in a deal rather than actually going blind into a capital raising as what most companies do, right? So effectively the end result is improved efficiency, faster decisions, and streamlined processes for everyone, right? Now the digital investment banking tools that I was talking about, right? The ability to integrate with SME debt, the ability to actually syndicate deals on an online platform, book builds, Matt said the investor matchmaking component, and also even secondary sales. That's for us the vision of what we actually see. Because if you can do that from end to end, from the time you're a startup through to the time you exit, if you can take care of that capability online, you're transforming the potential of a company because it's building its own profile over time. And it's actually utilizing that data to effectively either matchmake, continuously attracting people to the actual business, right? So that when companies going to capital raise, it's not just this one hit, consumes a whole bunch of time, and then they're trying to figure out whether it's going to go ahead or not go ahead. It's just a consistent process that's really efficient and not as consuming as much time for the companies. So when we've actually thought about how we provide the access to opportunities, we've utilized the GICS standard to doing this. And you see in this simple example how the ability to highlight healthcare, the ability to highlight biotech is really quite simple. For us, obviously, there's a lot of events. There can be an event-focused aspect to it. So we can actually either search for the company or they can drop down and there's an event that can be related to that. For the deal relevancy part, we've highlighted the key areas that investors like to look at as a starting point. In the future, we'll add more inputs to this so that we can be a lot more razor focused in the actual targeting. But this provides a really basic mechanism as far as how investors think about their opportunity. So for example, what stage they're thinking about investing, what locations they're looking at opportunities, what sectors are of interest for them, and then also typically the minimum and maximum investment. So what we will add over time is more natural language mechanisms on the sectors, like for example, AI, robotics, for example. Now for the deal relevancy, the way we've set this up is that, for example, I use the example of total blood profile in here. You can see that when I hover over total blood profile, it turns around and it highlights to me that I've got a preference match of that company with 80%. So the idea is for me to let the platform provide efficiency for you in helping you understand why a deal could actually be relevant to you. Now, if I see a deal that's relevant 80%, I want to actually understand it a little bit more. So I want to understand why it's actually a match. And in this, you can see the areas that it's actually matching with my preferences that I've already highlighted. Then if I want to take that further, you can see the way we've structured the information down the left-hand side of the screen is it perfectly caters with the way in which an investor wants to actually receive their information, right? So that overview, the overview tab then provides a high-level information for you as an investor as to help you understand why you could actually be interested in this opportunity before you request access to the deal room. In that overview, as I said, the idea is it's investor-friendly, it's streamlined, and it's standardized. So in the cues that we provide to companies, we're helping them standardize the way in which they're actually communicating with you as an investor, because often when they go to cabinet, they don't know the right structure in which they should be providing their information. This for them standardizes that. Now, this is a tool that we've set up for companies. Now, this is my actual deal room. So you can see if you went into my deal room, you can actually see a whole bunch of questions. And the frequently asked questions, what that means is that you don't have to ask all the questions that other investors have asked before you, right? And what you won't know is that what it does is it auto sorts them in such a way that the questions that get clicked on the most move to the top. So that way you can get an idea as far as what is the most common and popular questions being asked by investors. But once again, it's helping become more efficient in answering the questions you're most likely to have about a business. The next step is when you go to fill out a share application. It's frustrating if you've got to fill out an online one. It's frustrating typically when you're filling out online or offline ones, right? So the idea from us is if you can just put the information in once, effectively you just simply click on a tab and then it goes through the application process for you. It pre-fills it auto-fills the share applications, and that when it gets submitted, it just gets stored online, it's completely secure and it's simplified, and you've got access to it at any time to either provide to your accountants. From the company's perspective, we'll be looking to integrate that with a digital registry, so that process is completely seamless. So if companies actually have 10, 20, 30 investors coming onto their register in a year, they'll literally be saving tens of thousands they would have been spending on that process because it's completely online and integrated. From the company's perspective, what we've done to help their communications with you as an investor, we've actually given them a flow chart and we've templated everything at every stage. So they can literally click on something at each of these different stages, and it provides them with a template to send those communications. Because what we want to do is we want to help streamline the way in which they communicate with yourself as an investor, but also it stops their guesswork about, oh, what should I send? How do I do it? How long should it be? How much information should I attach? All those normal questions that go through a company's head, they don't need to ask that anymore because we've standardized that process for them. And then some of the features that we'll have coming is that we can have investor relations going directly through the platform. We'll also be providing some professional service tools. So for you guys that are corporate advisors and that actually work with companies in the actual ecosystem, we want to make this as simplistic as possible for you to use both with your companies and also with your own ecosystem of investors as well. And then the next part that obviously is the secondary sales, which we're obviously working towards. So these features will be coming over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. And the idea from our side is that we just want to streamline and make everything simple from the transaction process. So the summary from my side is what we believe the future of venture investment is that it's subscription-based deal making, Analytics are used to help create relevancy and understand the relevance between an investor and also an opportunity. There's frictionless engagement between the company and also the investor. And also there's some sort of liquidity potential going forward. And what that does is that efficiency will help create more opportunities for both companies, investors, and also the deal makers of the ecosystem. And I said, what we feel is that the real skill that advisors make is in the way in which they do the deal structuring, but the role that technology can play is just removing all the different inefficiencies in the actual process. So I hope that's been helpful for you to understand what we see as the future of actual capital raising and deal making. I've added my details. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I said I always like to provide sort of tips and sort of guidance on companies that are going through the capital raising process, and obviously just sort of updates for investors as well. And then obviously feel free to register on the CRIS site. Obviously, thank you for joining in for the Virtual Investment Summit, and I hope you got value from that presentation.